My name is Leah Townsend, and I turned 34 at my mother's dining room table. The candles weren't even lit yet when my mom leaned over to my dad and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch it. Since everyone's here, have your son changed the locks at her apartment? Her apartment? Mine. The one I bought with my own money. The one my 7-year-old son sleeps in. My dad nodded without looking up from his plate. My brother Kyle set down his fork, murmured something about a phone call, and walked out with his key ring. My family kept passing the potatoes. I smiled and complimented the pot roast. 1 hour later, Kyle came back through that front door with a face the color of hospital sheets, leaned down to Mom's ear, and whispered, "Mom, there." He never finished the sentence. Here's what nobody at that table knew. I already understood exactly what was waiting for him in my parking lot, because I had spent 6 weeks quietly building it. Ever since a declined debit card at a pharmacy counter started me pulling a thread that ended inside a manila folder in my mother's china hutch and showed me what my parents had been doing to me for 12 years. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where women who stayed quiet for years finally tell you exactly how they walked away. If stories about family, betrayal, and hard-won boundaries speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now let me take you back 6 weeks. 6 weeks before that dinner, my life was small and good and mine. I work nights in the ICU at St. Camillus in Dayton, which means I know how to stay calm while everything beeps. 12-hour shifts, then home to my condo in Maple Crossing over in Kettering, 15 minutes from the house I grew up in. I bought that condo in 2021, and I can still tell you what it felt like to turn the key the first time. 29 years old, and it was the first door that was ever only mine. My son Noah was 7 that summer, all elbows and questions, learning to ride his bike in the parking lot while my neighbor Walt yelled encouragement from his porch. Walt Hendricks is 68, a retired sheriff's deputy with 30 years on the job, a slow porch swing, and an old beagle named Biscuit who supervises the whole complex. Tuesdays, I drove across town to my parents' house for dinner because Tuesday dinner was on my mother's calendar, and things on my mother's calendar happened whether you wanted them to or not. That week, she called me twice about my birthday. "We're doing it here, honey. Family only." Her voice had a sweetness to it that I hadn't heard since I was a kid, and I remember standing at my kitchen counter with the phone against my shoulder, frowning at nothing. My mother has planned every holiday my family has ever had, but she had not thrown me a birthday dinner since I was 12. I told myself people soften. I told myself 61 does that to a woman. Then I finished the dishes, checked on Noah, and folded the thought away the way you fold a shirt you know you'll never wear. 2 days later, a pharmacy card reader would unfold it for me. You should know what my job was in the Townsend family, because it wasn't daughter. I was the fixer. At 16, I was the one reading the water bill at the kitchen table because Dad's eyes got tired. At 19, I did my parents' taxes for the first time, and I did them every spring after that. I managed Dad's blood pressure pills into a little day-of-the-week box. When the furnace died, when the insurance lapsed, when Kyle's landlord threatened to evict him, the phone rang in my pocket. My mother had a phrase for it, delivered like a blessing. That's what family does. Looking back, I can count 3 times in my life that sentence arrived without a favor attached. Here's the strange part. The part I'm still embarrassed to say out loud. I handled everyone's paperwork except my own. When I turned 18, Dad set up a gray file box in his den and said he'd keep my important documents safe. Birth certificate, social security card, the savings bond from Grandma Margaret. It felt like being taken care of. I was a scholarship kid working prep cook shifts through nursing school. I liked believing somebody was minding the deep stuff so I could mind the double shifts. I paid my rent, then my mortgage, through my little credit union, always on time, and I never once pulled my own credit report. I know how that sounds, coming from a woman who reads lab values for a living. But you don't audit the people who taught you to ride a bike. You just keep showing up on Tuesdays, passing the potatoes, doing their taxes. It took me 16 years to learn what was in that gray file box besides my birth certificate. It took one declined debit card to start the lesson. It happened at the CVS on Dorothy Lane on a Thursday afternoon. Noah had an ear infection. I had his antibiotics in one hand and my debit card in the other, and the reader flashed declined in gray letters. I ran it again. Declined. The backup card I keep for emergencies came up, suspected fraud. Call issuer. There was a line behind me, a teenager with energy drinks, an older woman with a cane, all of them politely studying the gum display while my face went hot. I paid with the crumpled 20s in the bottom of my purse, got Noah's medicine, and sat in my car in the parking lot doing the thing I do at work when a monitor starts screaming. Slow breath. Look at the numbers. That night, after Noah was asleep, I signed up for one of those free credit monitoring apps, the kind I'd been telling myself for years I didn't need. It loaded my file, and I sat there reading my own name like it belonged to a stranger. There was a Visa card on my report opened in 2022. I have never applied for a visa in my life. Balance, $4,800. Status, 60 days past due. That one delinquent account had dragged my credit score down a cliff, which is why a nurse with a spotless payment history got humiliated over a $14 prescription. My hands were steady. I want that on the record. 12 years in the ICU will do that for you. I clicked into the account details looking for the fraudster's address, expecting some drop house in Florida, some stranger's P.O. box. The billing address was a house on Kettering Avenue in Dayton. A house I know better than my own. I grew up in it. I did what you're supposed to do, in the order you're supposed to do it. Friday morning, I called the bank that issued the mystery visa, sat through hold music, and told the fraud department this account was not mine. I put a 90-day fraud alert on my file. I asked them to mail me copies of the application and the statements. The woman on the phone was kind, tired, and thorough, and near the end she read me the contact information listed on the account, just to verify. The phone number wasn't mine. It was a landline. I could have recited it in my sleep, because it has been my parents' kitchen phone since 1998. I thanked her in my calm nurse voice and hung up and stared at my own reflection in the black of the microwave door. And a memory surfaced, one I hadn't touched in years. When I was 27, a few months after Noah was born, I got a letter about a credit inquiry I didn't recognize. I did ask about it. I drove to my parents' house with the letter in my purse and put it on the kitchen table, and Dad chuckled and pulled a folded page from the file box in his den. Bank letterhead. An apology. Something about a clerical error that had been resolved. Mom patted my hand. Bank error, sweetheart. Your father already handled it. You have a newborn. Go worry about him. The alert I'd set expired on its own 90 days later, the way they do. I remembered thinking at the time that the letterhead looked off somehow, the paper too bright, the logo a shade too blue. Then the baby cried, and I let it go. Sitting in my kitchen 7 years later, I finally let myself finish the thought I'd started at 27. Saturday morning, Walt was out front fixing the latch on the fence gate that the HOA had been ignoring since spring, because Walt fixes things the way other men watch football. I held the gate steady while he worked the screwdriver, and Biscuit lay in the grass, supervising us both. He told me a story about his deputy days, about a forgery case from 1989 where a man's own sister had signed his name better than he could. 30 years on the job taught me one thing, kid, he said, tightening the last screw. Paper never lies. People do. I came within one breath of telling him everything right there at the fence. I had the sentence loaded. Something has been happening with my accounts, and I could feel how good it would be to hand the weight to someone with a bad-shaped memory, but I've been the strong one so long that asking for help feels like undressing in public. Since the divorce, my world had narrowed to Noah, the ICU, and this parking lot, and I'd gotten used to carrying things alone, so I said something about the HOA instead. My phone rang while Walt was still holding the screwdriver, and I answered without checking, and my mother's voice came through bright as a bell. You're still holding Saturday for your birthday, aren't you? Wait,